The alarm sang through the monitoring station like a dying bird. Vorkan lifted his head from the data screen, his four eyes narrowing at the sound. Around him, other Silthari scientists stopped their work and turned toward the main display. Unknown object detected, the computer announced in its flat voice. Sector 792. Distance 40,000 kilometers. Vorkan stood from his chair, his tall, thin body unfolding like a piece of paper. He walked to the main screen and touched it with one long finger. The image changed, showing empty space filled with stars. Then he saw it. A dark shape floating alone in the black. "Bring it closer," he said. The image grew larger. The object was a ship, but not like any ship Vorkan had seen before. It was long and gray, with a shape that reminded him of ancient weapons from his world's history. The hull was damaged in places with marks that showed old battles. Scorch marks ran along its sides like scars. "Scan it," Vorkan ordered. The technician at the next station pressed several buttons. Numbers and symbols filled a smaller screen beside the main image. The technician's face changed, showing confusion. "Sir, the readings are strange. This vessel is very old. The power systems use nuclear fission. The propulsion is chemical-based. This technology is at least 300 years behind current standards." Vorkan moved closer to the screen. 300 years old? That made no sense. Ships that old were usually broken down for parts or kept in museums. They did not drift in deep space near Silthari territory. "Life signs?" Vorkan asked. "None. The ship appears abandoned." "Then where did it come from?" The technician worked quietly for a moment. "I am detecting markings on the hull. They appear to be in an unknown language." "Wait, the computer is translating now." He paused. "The markings say USS Missouri, BB-63. Vorkan repeated the words slowly. USS Missouri. He had never heard of this ship or the people who made it. "Send a message to the council. Tell them we have found something unusual." The technician nodded and began typing. Vorkan could not stop looking at the ship on the screen. Something about it made him uncomfortable. The design was wrong. Most ships in the galaxy were smooth and curved, built to move quickly through space. They used energy shields for protection and light materials to stay fast. This ship was different. It had sharp angles and looked heavy. It looked like it was made to hit things, not avoid them. 2 days passed before the council representatives arrived. They came in a fast ship that gleamed white against the stars. Vorkan met them at the docking bay. There were 3 of them: a Centauri diplomat with blue skin and 6 arms, a Drex military advisor covered in thick scales, and a Vreen scientist whose body glowed softly in the dim light. "Show us this discovery," the Centauri said. Her name was Lyrasol, and she spoke with the voice of someone used to giving orders. Vorkan led them to the observation deck. The Missouri floated outside the window, looking even larger now that their station had moved closer. The council representative stood silent for a long moment. "It is primitive," the Drex said finally. His voice was deep and rough. "Why bring us here for this?" "Because of what it is made from," Vorkan answered. He called up the scan results on a nearby screen. "Look at the hull composition." The Vreen scientist stepped forward, her glow brightening with interest. She studied the numbers, then looked at Vorkan with wide eyes. "This cannot be correct. Run the scan again." "I have run it 7 times, Vorkan said. "The results are always the same." "What is it?" Lyrasol asked, irritation in her voice. The Vreen scientist pointed at the screen. "The hull is made of steel." "Solid steel?" "The armor plating in some places is over 400 millimeters thick." Silence filled the room. "That is impossible," the Drex said. "No one builds ships that way. The weight alone would make it too slow to be useful. Yet here it is," Vorkan said quietly. Lyrasol moved closer to the window. Her 6 arms crossed over her chest in thought. "Why would anyone build a ship this way? It makes no sense. Shields are lighter and more effective." "Perhaps they did not have shield technology," the Vreen suggested. "Then they should have made their ships faster, harder to hit," the Drex argued. "Not heavier." Vorkan had been thinking about this for 2 days. He had formed a theory, but it seemed too strange to be true. Now, looking at the confused faces around him, he decided to speak. "What if they built it this way on purpose?" he said. "What if their plan was not to avoid damage, but to survive it?" The others looked at him. "Think about it," Vorkan continued. "Our ships use shields and speed. When those fail, our ships are destroyed. But this vessel—" He gestured at the Missouri. "This vessel is the shield. It is built to take hits and keep fighting. That is a brutal philosophy, Lyrasol said softly. Yes, Vorkan agreed. But look at the damage on the hull. This ship has been in battles. It has been hit many times, yet it survived long enough to be abandoned, not destroyed. The Drex walked to the window and pressed one clawed hand against the glass. I want to see inside. Send a boarding team. Vorkan had already prepared for this. Within an hour, a small team in spacesuits left the station and crossed to the Missouri. Vorkan watched from the observation deck as they cut through an airlock and entered the dead ship. The team's leader was named Keseva, a young Shilthari with more courage than sense. His voice came through the speakers as he moved through the ship's corridors. The interior is cramped, Keseva reported. The ceilings are low. Everything is made of metal. There is no comfort here. Find the command center, Vorkan instructed. The team moved deeper into the ship. The camera feeds showed narrow hallways and small rooms packed with equipment. Everything looked old and maintained by hand rather than automated systems. I found something, Keseva said. It looks like a weapon system. The camera showed a massive gun turret. 3 long barrels pointed forward, each one wider than Keseva was tall. The metal was thick and heavy. What kind of weapon is this? Lyrasol asked. Vorkan pulled up the scan data. According to the readings, these are kinetic weapons. They fire physical projectiles using chemical explosives. Primitive, the Drex muttered. Perhaps, Vorkan said. But look at the size. Each projectile would weigh over 1,000 kilograms. Fired at high velocity, the kinetic energy would be enormous. The boarding team continued their exploration. They found crew quarters, each one small and simple. They found engines, massive and complex. They found storage areas filled with ammunition and supplies. Everywhere they looked, they found more evidence of the same design philosophy. Heavy, durable, built to last. Finally, they reached the command center. Keseva's camera showed a room filled with instruments and controls. In the center was a chair, presumably for the ship's commander. Keseva moved to a console and activated it. To everyone's surprise, it still had power from some backup system. I am accessing the ship's records, Keseva said. Data began flowing to the station. Vorkan watched as files appeared on his screen. Ship logs, maintenance records, mission reports. And then he saw it. A single line that made his blood run cold. This vessel served for over 50 years, he said slowly. It fought in multiple wars. It was hit by bombs, missiles, and enemy fire. It survived all of it. Impossible, Lyrasol whispered. Not impossible, Vorkan corrected. Just different from what we know. He pulled up more records. The Missouri was not alone. It was one of many such ships. Dozens of them, all built the same way. All built to absorb damage that would destroy any modern vessel. Who built this ship? The Drex demanded. Vorkan searched through the files until he found the answer. They call themselves humans. Their world is called Earth. Have we made contact with them? Vorkan checked the council databases. His 4 eyes widened. Yes, first contact was established 18 months ago. They requested trade relations and a seat on the council. And their request is still being reviewed. Lyrasol turned from the window, her expression serious. I think we need to speed up that review. Anyone who builds ships like this, we need to know more about them. Vorkan nodded slowly. He looked at the Missouri floating in space, silent and dead but still threatening somehow. It was just an old warship, abandoned and forgotten, but it represented something that made him deeply uncomfortable. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species that did not believe in avoiding danger. They believed in facing it directly, in building walls of metal so thick that nothing could break through. And if this was what they built 300 years ago, what were they building now? That question would haunt Vorkan in the days to come. Vorkan stood inside the Missouri's main corridor and felt the weight of history around him. 3 days had passed since the boarding team first entered the ship. Now he was here himself, walking through the metal halls with his own feet. He had insisted on coming. Some things could not be understood through cameras and sensors alone. The air inside was cold and stale. The station had connected temporary life support, but it only made the ship feel more like a tomb. Vorkan's footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Behind him, Keseva carried scanning equipment and a portable light. Where are we going? Keseva asked. To see the weapons again, Vorkan said. I need to understand them better. They walked through narrow passages and down steep stairs. Everything about the ship felt cramped and uncomfortable. Vorkan was not a large being, but even he had to duck his head in some places. He tried to imagine living here for months or years. The thought made him feel trapped. They reached the gun turret. It was even more impressive from inside. The 3 massive barrels extended forward through thick armor. Behind them, machinery filled the room. Chains and gears for loading, hydraulics for aiming. Everything was mechanical, built to work even if the electronics failed. Vorkan approached the control panel. It was covered in switches and dials, all labeled in the human language. The computer in his suit translated the words for him. 16-inch 50 caliber Mark 7, he read aloud. Projectile weight 1,200 kilograms. Muzzle velocity 760 meters per second. Maximum range 38 kilometers. Keseva made a sound of confusion. Those numbers seem small. Our plasma cannons can hit targets at 100,000 kilometers. Yes, Vorkan said, but consider the environment. This weapon was not meant for space combat. It was built for planetary warfare. On a world with atmosphere and gravity, these specifications are quite effective. He pulled up a calculation on his handheld device. A 1,200 kilogram projectile traveling at 760 meters per second has a kinetic energy of approximately 346 million joules. That is equivalent to about 82 kilograms of chemical explosives. Keseva's eyes widened. For each shot. And this turret has 3 barrels. The ship has 3 turrets, 9 barrels total. Vorkan did more calculations. This ship could deliver over 3 billion joules of kinetic energy in a single salvo, every 30 seconds. That is excessive. That is human, Vorkan said quietly. They moved on, exploring deeper into the ship. They found the magazines where ammunition was stored. Massive shells lay in racks, each one taller than Vorkan. There were hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. The humans had built this ship to fight for a long time without resupply. Next, they found the crew quarters. Row after row of narrow beds stacked 3 high. Small lockers for personal items. A few faded pictures still hung on walls showing human faces. They were an odd species with only 2 eyes and strange flat faces. They looked soft compared to most spacefaring races. Yet these soft creatures had built this iron fortress. Vorkan stopped at one bunk and examined the space. How big are humans? He asked Keseva. Keseva checked his database. Average height is 1.7 meters. Mass is about 70 kilograms. Vorkan looked at the bed. It was barely long enough for a being that size. There was no room to move, no privacy. Over 2,000 of them lived on this ship, he said. In these conditions. For months at a time. They must have hated it, Keseva said. Perhaps, or perhaps they accepted it as the price of their mission. Vorkan moved to a small desk and found a journal there, its pages yellow with age. He carefully opened it and let his suit's computer scan the writing. The translation appeared on his display. It was a diary kept by someone named Johnson, an engineer who maintained the ship's engines. Vorkan read a few entries aloud. 15th day at sea. The weather is rough. Half the crew is seasick. But the old girl keeps going. She always does. He flipped ahead. Took fire today during bombardment run. 3 hits on the port side. The armor held. A few men shaken up but no serious injuries. Captain says we will be back on station tomorrow. Missouri does not quit. Keseva listened quietly. They sound almost affectionate toward the ship. They trusted it, Vorkan said. They knew it would protect them. That trust was earned through experience. They found the ship's main computer core next. It was primitive by modern standards, but still functional. Vorkan connected his equipment and began downloading the ship's complete history. Files appeared on his screen. Launch date, crew rosters, mission logs. The Missouri had been built in 1944, during something humans called World War II. It had fought in several major battles, survived direct hits from enemy weapons, and served for decades afterward. One file caught Vorkan's attention. It was labeled Battle Damage Report, Okinawa, 1945. He opened it and read carefully. The ship had been attacked by something called a kamikaze. A human translation program explained that this meant an enemy pilot who deliberately crashed his aircraft into ships. The Missouri had been hit directly. The kamikaze's aircraft had exploded against the armor. The damage report was brief. Minor dent in armor plating. Some paint scorched. No penetration, no casualties. Ship remained fully operational. An aircraft loaded with explosives had hit the ship directly, and the humans had described it as minor damage. Keseva. Vorkon said slowly. What would happen if a modern fighter craft crashed into one of our ships? Keseva thought about it. Our ships are not designed for such impacts. The collision would likely breach the hull. Depending on where it hit, it could destroy the ship. Vorkon nodded. That was what he had thought. He continued reading through the files. The Missouri had served in multiple wars across decades. Korea in the 1950s, the Persian Gulf in 1991. Each time it had fired its massive guns at targets on land, supporting troops, destroying fortifications. Each time it had come home intact. He found technical specifications for the armor. The main belt was over 300 millimeters of hardened steel. The deck armor was nearly 200 millimeters in places. The turrets were even thicker, with armor exceeding 400 millimeters. Do you know what interests me most? Vorkon said to Keseva. This ship was not unique. It was one of a class. The humans built multiple vessels like this. How many? Vorkon searched the files. The Iowa class consisted of 4 ships. But that was just one class. They built many classes of battleships over the years. Dozens of vessels, all following the same design philosophy. All this heavy armor. Yes, and that was just their ocean warships. They also built aircraft, tanks, fortifications, all designed the same way, heavy, durable, built to last. Keseva was quiet for a moment. It seems wasteful. All that material for protection instead of weapons or speed. It seems wasteful to us, Vorkon corrected. But think about it from their perspective. The humans lived on a single world. They could not run away from their enemies. They could not retreat into space. Every battle was final. Every defeat was catastrophic. So they built things that would not break. He pulled up an image from the files. It showed the Missouri firing all 9 of its main guns at once. The blast was enormous, fire and smoke erupting from the barrels. The ship itself was barely visible through the cloud of destruction it was creating. This is their answer to every problem, Vorkon said. Hit it harder. Make walls thicker. Never give up. Never break. They spent hours more exploring the ship. They found medical facilities designed to handle hundreds of casualties. They found damage control equipment meant to patch holes and fight fires. They found backup systems for the backup systems. Everything about the Missouri spoke of the same message. Prepare for the worst, and survive it. Finally, as they prepared to leave, Vorkon stopped in the main corridor one last time. He put his hand on the metal wall and felt the coldness of the steel through his suit. This ship is 300 years old, he said quietly. It uses technology we consider primitive. It moves slowly. It has no shields, no energy weapons, no artificial gravity. By every modern standard, it is obsolete. But, Keseva prompted. But I would not want to fight it, Vorkon admitted. Even now, even dead and abandoned, it is frightening. Because it represents something we have forgotten. The willingness to trade efficiency for survival. The acceptance that war is terrible and bloody, and the only way to win is to be tougher than your enemy. They left the ship and returned to the station. Vorkon went immediately to his quarters and began writing a report. He worked through the night, carefully documenting everything they had learned. The Missouri was not just a ship. It was a philosophy made physical. It showed how humans thought about conflict and survival, and if this was their thinking 300 years ago, when they were confined to a single world, what was their thinking now? The humans had achieved spaceflight. They had faster-than-light travel. They had fusion power and advanced computers. And somewhere out there, they were building ships using all that new technology, but still following the old philosophy. Ships that did not avoid damage. Ships that absorbed it. Ships that kept fighting no matter what. Vorkon finished his report as the station's artificial dawn began. He attached all the scans, all the files, all the data they had gathered. Then he sent it to the council with a priority flag. The subject line was simple. Humans. Immediate strategic assessment required. The war room of Zilthari High Command was a cold place. It sat deep beneath the surface of their homeworld, protected by layers of rock and defensive shields. The walls glowed with displays showing star charts and fleet positions. In the center, a large holographic table projected images that floated in the air. General Thexnor stood at the table, his 4 arms crossed behind his back. Around him, military analysts and strategic officers worked at their stations. The room hummed with quiet activity. "Show me the human ship again," Thexnor commanded. The hologram changed. The image of the Missouri appeared, rotating slowly. The general walked around it, studying every angle. He had read Vorkon's report 3 times already. Each reading left him more disturbed. "This cannot be real," said Commander Velshara from her station. She was young for her rank, promoted quickly due to her skill with tactical simulations. "No one builds ships this way. Not anymore." "The evidence is clear," Thexnor replied. "The ship exists. The scans do not lie. But the implications," Velshara trailed off, "are troubling. Yes." Thexnor touched the hologram, making it zoom in on the armor plating. 400 millimeters of hardened steel. "We could hit this with our plasma lances and barely scratch it. Surely our weapons are more advanced than what this ship faced." "Are they?" Thexnor turned to face her. "Our plasma weapons work by superheating the target's hull. They are very effective against modern materials that melt or vaporize easily. But steel?" He shook his head. "Steel has been used as armor for thousands of years precisely because it resists heat so well." Another officer spoke up. "Even if the armor is strong, the ship is slow. We could simply outmaneuver it." "This ship is 300 years old," Thexnor reminded them. "We are not facing this ship. We are facing what the humans are building now, with modern technology." Silence fell over the room. That was the real question, the one that had been haunting Thexnor since he read the report. What would a human warship look like today? "Velshara," the general said. "Run a simulation. Start with the Missouri's basic design philosophy. Heavy armor, kinetic weapons, emphasis on durability. Now upgrade it. Give it modern power systems, modern materials, modern propulsion. What do you get?" Velshara turned to her console and began working. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. Numbers scrolled across screens. The other analysts gathered around to watch. "This will take some time," she said. "I need to make assumptions about human technology levels." "Use our own technology as a baseline," Thexnor ordered. "If they have achieved faster than light travel, they must have similar capabilities to us." The simulation ran. Velshara built a theoretical human warship piece by piece. She started with the hull. If the Missouri used steel, what would a modern human ship use? Probably titanium alloys or carbon composites. Lighter than steel but stronger. She calculated armor thickness based on maintaining the Missouri's protective ratio. "I am showing armor plating of at least 200 millimeters of advanced composites," she reported, possibly backed by additional layers of ceramic or reactive materials. "What would that stop?" Thexnor asked. Velshara ran impact simulations. "Our standard plasma lances would need sustained fire to penetrate. Maybe 30 seconds of continuous hits on the same spot. Our missiles?" She paused, checking the numbers. "Most of our missiles would detonate on the surface without reaching the interior." "What about multiple hits? Concentrated fire? That would work. Eventually. But this is assuming the ship just sits there and takes it. If they have point defense systems, our missiles might not even reach the hull." Thexnor nodded slowly. "Continue. Add weapons." Velshara moved to the weapon systems. The Missouri used gunpowder to launch metal shells. Primitive but effective. Modern humans would use something better. Railguns, probably. Electromagnetic launchers that could accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. If they follow the same philosophy, she said, they would use kinetic weapons. Railguns firing dense metal slugs. At near relativistic speeds, the kinetic energy would be... She stopped, staring at her screen. "How much?" Thexnor demanded. "More than our plasma lances, much more. A single hit could penetrate our ships completely. Entrance hole and exit hole with everything in between destroyed." The room grew quieter. Several officers exchanged worried glances. "What about defense?" someone asked. "Surely they have shields." Velshara added shield generators to her simulation. "Probably. But given their philosophy, I expect their shields to be supplemental rather than primary defense. The armor is primary. The shields just reduce damage before it reaches the armor." "That is backwards," Commander Felton said. "We rely on shields first. When they fail, we use evasive maneuvers. Armor is our last resort." "Which means we are fragile compared to them," Thexnor said bluntly. "Our ships are fast and well armed. But if something gets through our defenses, we are crippled or destroyed. Human ships would just keep fighting." He paced around the holographic table. "What else? Give me the full picture." Velshara continued building her simulation. She added engines, powerful fusion drives that could move the massive armored hull. She added reactors, multiple redundant power systems like the backup systems they had found on the Missouri. She added crew quarters, probably still cramped but better than the ancient ship. The final product appeared on the holographic display. It was a monster, twice the size of a standard Zilthari cruiser, heavy armor wrapped around every surface. Multiple weapon turrets bristled from the hull. Engine pods larger than some entire ships jutted from the rear. "This is what I project a human heavy cruiser would look like," Velshara said quietly. Everyone in the room stared at the image. "How many of these could we destroy?" Thexnor asked. "If we had to fight one, how would we win?" Velshara ran a battle simulation. She placed one human ship against a standard Zilthari battle group. 5 cruisers, 10 destroyers, 20 fighters. The simulation began. The holographic battle played out in fast motion. The Zilthari fleet opened fire from long range. Plasma lances and missiles crossed the distance. The human ship's shields flared, absorbing some impacts. Others hit the armor and scorched it but did not penetrate. The human ship kept coming, accelerating toward the Zilthari fleet. When it reached firing range, the simulation showed the human weapons opening up. Railgun fire tore through space at incredible velocities. The first volley destroyed 3 Zilthari cruisers, punching clean through their shields and hulls. The second volley crippled 2 more. The Zilthari fighters swarmed the human ship, firing their light weapons. They might as well have been throwing rocks. The armor ignored them. Point defense systems picked off the fighters one by one. The simulation ended with the human ship damaged but functional. The Zilthari battle group was scattered wreckage. "Run it again," Thexnor ordered, his voice tight. "Give us better tactics. Hit and run attacks. Use our speed advantage." Velshara ran the simulation again. This time the Zilthari fleet stayed at long range, darting into fire and then retreating. It worked better. They destroyed the human ship eventually, but it took 3 times as many ships. And the human vessel took half of them down before it died. "This is just one ship," Felton said, sounding shaken. "How many do they have?" Thexnor turned to his intelligence officer. "Check the first contact records. How many ships did the humans bring when they approached the council?" The officer checked his database. 12 vessels were detected. They called them diplomatic escorts. Diplomatic escorts. Thexnor laughed bitterly. "Show me the scan records from that encounter." The intelligence officer pulled up files from 18 months ago. When the humans first made contact with the Galactic Council, they had arrived at the border and requested a meeting. Council ships had approached and performed standard scans. Thexnor read through the reports. At the time, the Council analyst had noted the human ship seemed inefficient. Heavy construction, oversized reactors, armor that seemed excessive for civilian vessels. The Council had assumed the humans were simply less advanced, making up for technological gaps with brute force engineering. Now those same reports looked different. Now they looked like warnings that no one had heeded. "They brought 12 warships to a diplomatic meeting," Thexnor said slowly, "and we smiled and nodded and did not realize what we were seeing. Should we contact the Council?" Velshara asked. "The Council is debating trade agreements and cultural exchanges." Thexnor replied, "They do not want to hear about military threats. Not from a species that seems so primitive." He looked at the hologram of Velshara's theoretical human ship. It looked brutal. It looked unstoppable, and it was only a guess. The real ships might be worse. "Find out everything we can about human space forces," Thexnor ordered. "Ships, bases, fleet deployments. I want to know what we are dealing with." "That information may not be available," the intelligence officer said carefully. "The humans have shared little military data, then make assumptions. Educated guesses. But I need to know what our fleet would face if we ever went to war with these people." The intelligence officer nodded and left to begin his work. Thexnor remained in the war room, staring at the hologram. He thought about the Missouri, that ancient ship drifting in space. Vorkan had not slept well in days. His quarters on the research station felt too quiet, too empty. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Missouri floating in space like a warning no one understood. He had been requested to travel to the Council archives on the Capital World. The message said General Thexnor wanted him to examine the first contact records. Vorkan agreed immediately. He had questions that needed answers. The journey took 3 days. Vorkan spent the time reviewing everything he knew about humans. It was not much. The species had appeared on the galactic stage only 18 months ago. They had been polite, professional, and unremarkable. The Council had filed their application for membership and moved on to more pressing matters. The council archives were impressive. A massive building on the capital world, filled with thousands of years of history. Records from every species in the council. Treaties, laws, first contact reports, everything carefully preserved and catalogued. A Syntheri archivist met Vorkan at the entrance. Her name was Sorath, and she seemed excited to have a researcher visiting. "We rarely get scientists here," she said as she led him through marble hallways. "Most people access the archives remotely. What brings you to visit in person?" "I need to see files that may have been overlooked," Vorkan explained. "Sometimes context is lost in digital records." Sorath nodded wisely. "You are correct. There is knowledge in seeing the original documents and holding them in your hands." She led him to a private study room. The walls were lined with data terminals. A comfortable chair sat before a large screen. On the table was a cup of warm tea, steam rising from its surface. "The human first contact files are loaded and ready," Sorath said. "If you need anything else, just call for me." Vorkan thanked her and sat down. He sipped the tea, gathering his thoughts, then activated the terminal. The first file was a date stamp. 18 months ago, 312 days to be exact. The location was the Outer Rim, near a system humans called Alpha Centauri. Council patrol ships had detected unusual faster-than-light signatures. They had gone to investigate. Vorkan opened the ship logs. Captain Mintar of the Council vessel Brightwing had written the initial report. "We encountered 12 unknown vessels today. They were waiting at the edge of the system, maintaining a stationary position. When we approached, they broadcast a greeting in several languages. None matched our databases, so we responded with standard first contact protocols. They replied within minutes. Their translation computers were impressive." Vorkan continued reading. "The unknown vessels identified themselves as representing the human species from a world called Earth. They expressed interest in opening diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. I invited their leaders to meet aboard Brightwing. They declined, asking if we would meet aboard one of their ships instead. I agreed." Vorkan paused. "That was interesting. The humans had not wanted council representatives on their ships?" No, he reread the passage. The humans had not wanted to come to the council ship. They preferred to host. That spoke of either confidence or caution. He found Captain Mintar's description of visiting the human vessel. "We docked with their flagship. It was much larger than I expected. The hull appeared extremely robust. Our sensors had difficulty penetrating it to scan the interior. When we entered, we were greeted by a human who introduced herself as Ambassador Chen. She was courteous and professional. The ship's interior was surprisingly spacious compared to the exterior hull thickness. Hull thickness. Even 18 months ago, that detail had been noted. But no one had understood its significance. Vorkan opened the technical scans from that encounter. The council ships had performed standard sensor sweeps of the human vessels. The results were marked as anomalous in several places. He read through the notes. Excessive structural reinforcement. Power output suggests military-grade reactors. Weapon systems detected but not identified. Armor composition resists standard scanning frequencies. And then, at the bottom of the report, a comment from the scanning officer. Design philosophy appears inefficient, but functional. Possibly indicates limited material science or compensating for technological gaps. Vorkan wanted to scream. The clues had been there, right from the beginning. But everyone had looked at the humans and seen a primitive species trying their best with limited knowledge. No one had considered that the humans might have designed their ships exactly the way they wanted them. He pulled up footage from the first meeting. The council kept video records of all first contact events. Vorkan watched as Captain Mintar and his staff entered the human ship. The humans were smaller than most council species. They looked almost fragile with their soft skin and small frames. Ambassador Chen was particularly slight, barely reaching Mintar's shoulder. She wore a formal suit and smiled frequently, but behind her Vorkan noticed the ship's crew. They wore uniforms that looked military in style. Dark colors, clean lines, patches on their shoulders showing ranks and positions. They moved with discipline and precision. This was not a civilian vessel. It was a warship pretending to be diplomatic. Vorkan fast-forwarded through the meeting. Ambassador Chen presented a formal request for opening relations. She explained that humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. They had been exploring nearby systems and had recently learned about the Galactic Council. They were excited to join the greater community. The presentation was perfect. Humble but confident, requesting guidance but offering knowledge in return. Exactly what the council wanted to hear from a new species. Mintar had been impressed. His log entries praised the humans for their diplomatic skills and willingness to learn. He recommended accepting their application for membership. Vorkon closed that file and opened another. This one was a summary of human culture, prepared by council anthropologists. They had studied the radio and internet signals coming from Earth, learning about human history and society. The report was hundreds of pages long. Vorkon skimmed through it looking for anything relevant. He found a section on human military history. It was brief, only a few paragraphs. The anthropologist who wrote it had noted that humans seemed unusually warlike compared to most species. They had fought thousands of wars throughout their history. Major conflicts had involved hundreds of millions of combatants. The anthropologist had concluded that humanity was still in a primitive stage of social development. They would probably mature and become more peaceful once they integrated with the council. Vorkon closed his 4 eyes in frustration. The anthropologist had seen the data and drawn exactly the wrong conclusion. Humans were not primitively warlike. They were experienced. They had thousands of years of practice at warfare. They knew what worked and what did not. He opened another file. This one contained images of human settlements. The council had used long-range telescopes to observe Earth and its colonies. Vorkon zoomed in on Earth itself. It was a beautiful world, blue and green and white. Cities covered large areas. Orbital stations dotted the space around it. Everything looked peaceful and advanced, but then he looked closer. The cities had defensive walls. The orbital stations had armor plating. Even civilian transport showed signs of reinforced construction. He pulled up images of human colonies on other worlds. Mars, Luna, various moons of the outer planets. Every settlement showed the same pattern. Heavy construction, defensive positions, backup systems. The humans built everything as if they expected to be attacked at any moment. Vorkon found a file, marked human commercial vessels. The council had scanned several human cargo ships during their first months of contact. These were not military ships, just merchants, traders, civilian transports. The scans showed reinforced hulls, emergency bulkheads, redundant life support. One cargo ship had armor plating that would be excessive even on a military vessel. When council officials asked about this, the human captain had seemed confused by the question. "Space is dangerous," he had said simply. "Why would not we protect our people?" Vorkon sat back in his chair. The picture was becoming clear. Humans did not think like other species. They did not divide their world into military and civilian, safe and dangerous. Everything was potentially dangerous. Everything needed protection. This was not paranoia. This was learned behavior. Humans had evolved on a world where danger was constant. Predators, natural disasters, disease, and most of all each other. They had survived by being tough and prepared. Then they had gone to space, and they had taken that mindset with them. He found a personnel file that made him pause. It showed the crew roster for one of the human diplomatic vessels. Over 800 people on a single ship. Vorkon compared it to the size of the vessel. The ship was large, but not that large. 800 people meant it was crowded. The humans were packing their ships with crew the same way they had packed the Missouri. Maximizing capability even at the cost of comfort. But why so many people? Vorkon checked the crew positions. Engineers, technicians, medical staff, damage control teams. Far more than a normal ship would need, unless the ship expected to take damage, unless it expected casualties, unless it planned to keep fighting even when things went wrong. Vorkon found a conversation recording that had been flagged as unusual. A council diplomat had asked a human officer why their ships carried so many weapons. The human had looked surprised by the Quest Emperor Kael'tos of the Shilthari Empire stood before the massive window of his throne room and looked at the stars. His empire stretched across 12 systems. His fleets numbered over 500 warships. He was the most powerful ruler in this sector of the galaxy, and he was about to start a war. "Your Majesty," General Thexner said from behind him, "the Council has rejected our territorial claims. They insist the disputed systems belong to them." "The Council is weak," Kael'tos said without turning. "They talk and debate while we act. Those systems are ours by right of strength. The Council will fight. Let them. Our fleet is superior. We will crush their defenses in a matter of weeks. Texnor hesitated. Your Majesty, I must again voice my concerns about the humans. If the Council calls for aid, the humans are not our concern. Keltos turned to face his general. They are new to this galaxy. They have no alliances, no obligations to the Council. They will stay neutral. But if they do not, then we destroy them as well. The Emperor walked to his throne and sat down. I have read your reports, Texnor. You worry too much about one old ship. The humans may have tough vessels, but we have numbers. We have experience. We have the will to dominate. Texnor said nothing. He had tried to warn the Emperor. He had shown him the simulations, the projections, the analysis. But Keltos saw only an opportunity to expand the Empire. He would not be dissuaded. Begin the offensive, Keltos commanded. Strike their border stations at dawn. Show the Council what happens to those who deny us. Texnor bowed and left the throne room. His hearts were heavy. He had been a soldier for 40 years. He had fought in a dozen wars, and he had never felt this sense of approaching doom before. The Silthari fleet launched its attack the next morning. 300 warships crossed into Council space and opened fire on the defense stations. Plasma lances lit up the darkness. Missiles streaked toward their targets. Within hours, 6 Council stations were destroyed or crippled. The Council's response was immediate. They activated their defense treaties and called up their reserves. They also sent out a call for help to their allies and trading partners, including humanity. Vorkon was back at his research station when he heard the news. War had started. The Silthari had made their move. The Council was fighting back but taking heavy losses, and humanity had responded to the call for help. They are sending ships, Kesava told him, reading the message that had just arrived. 12 vessels. The same number they brought to first contact. 12. Vorkon felt a chill run through his body. Only 12 to face 300 Silthari warships? Perhaps they do not understand the scale of the conflict. Or perhaps, Vorkon said slowly, they think 12 is enough. The human fleet arrived 4 days later. They came out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Silthari home system. Their appearance caused immediate chaos in the Empire's command center. Unknown ships detected. A sensor operator called out. 12 contacts. They matched the human vessel signatures from first contact. General Texnor rushed to the command center. He looked at the display showing the 12 human ships. They were larger than he remembered. Much larger. Get me visual, he ordered. The screen showed the human fleet. The ships were massive, each one the size of a small space station. They were dark gray, almost black, with hulls that looked like they were carved from solid metal. Weapon turrets dotted every surface. Engine pods glowed with intense blue light. They looked like the Missouri, but built by gods instead of mortals. They are heading toward us, the sensor operator reported. Speed is moderate. They are not attempting evasive patterns. Are they scanning us? Yes, sir. Active sensor sweeps across our entire fleet. Texnor felt his mouth go dry. Send them a message. Tell them this conflict is not their concern. Tell them to withdraw. The communications officer worked quickly. A moment later, they are responding. A human face appeared on the screen. A male older with gray hair and hard eyes. He wore a dark uniform with symbols on the collar. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Space Navy. The Galactic Council has requested our assistance in defending against your aggression. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces. Stand down now, or we will make you stand down. Texnor stared at the human. Admiral Chen did not look scared or uncertain. He looked like a man stating a simple fact. They have 12 ships, someone whispered. We have over 200 in this system alone. Fire a warning shot, Emperor Keltos commanded. He had arrived in the command center and was watching the display. Show them what happens to those who threaten us. Your Majesty, Texnor began, but the Emperor cut him off. Fire. The weapons officer hesitated, then obeyed. A plasma lance from the nearest Silthari battleship fired across the distance. It was a light shot, meant to frighten rather than destroy. The beam struck the lead human ship directly on its forward section. The human ship's shields flared, a brief shimmer of energy. The plasma beam hit the armor beneath. There was a flash of heat. A small scorch mark appeared on the hull. The human ship did not slow down. It did not change course. It kept coming. They are increasing speed, the sensor operator reported. All 12 ships accelerating toward our fleet. Fire again, Keltos ordered. Full weapons. All ships in range, the Zilthari fleet opened fire. Dozens of ships launched everything they had. Plasma lances, particle beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. The human ships pushed through it like ships sailing through rain. Their shields absorbed some hits. Their armor took the rest. Scorch marks covered their hulls. Sections glowed red with heat. But they did not stop. They did not break apart. They just kept coming. Why are they not dying? Kael'tos shouted. Thexanor watched in horror as his predictions came true. The human ships were doing exactly what he had feared. They were absorbing damage that would destroy any normal vessel. They are entering their firing range, the sensor operator said, his voice shaking. The human ships opened fire. Thexanor had seen many weapons in his military career. He thought he had seen the worst that war could offer. He was wrong. The human railguns fired. There was no flash, no visible beam, just metal slugs accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed. They crossed the distance in fractions of a second. The first Zilthari battleship simply came apart. One moment it was there firing its weapons. The next moment a railgun slug passed completely through it from bow to stern. The ship's structure failed. It broke into 3 pieces, atmosphere and debris spraying into space. The second and third battleships died the same way. Clean hits that punched through shields and armor like they were made of paper. Evasive maneuvers. Thexanor screamed into the communication system. All ships scatter. The Zilthari fleet tried to disperse. They were fast ships built for speed and maneuverability. But speed did not matter when the enemy's weapons traveled at near light speed. There was no time to dodge. By the time you saw the shot coming, you were already dead. The human ships moved through the Zilthari fleet like predators through prey. Their weapons fired continuously. Railguns tore through ship after ship. Missile launchers added to the destruction, sending smart munitions that tracked fleeing vessels and detonated with devastating force. The Zilthari fought back. They concentrated their fire on individual human ships, pouring everything they had into overwhelming the defenses. It worked partially. One human ship lost its shields entirely. Its armor was breached in multiple places. Atmosphere vented from the wounds, but it kept fighting. Its weapons never stopped firing. Even damaged, even bleeding air and fire, it continued to destroy Zilthari ships. Retreat, Thexanor ordered. All ships fall back to the defensive ring. What was left of the fleet tried to withdraw. Less than half made it. The human ships pursued, their weapons reaching out across vast distances to find targets. Emperor Kael'tos stood frozen, watching his fleet die. This is impossible, he whispered. We outnumbered them 20-1. Numbers do not matter if you cannot damage the enemy, Thexanor said bitterly. I tried to tell you. The humans do not fight like we do. They built their ships to take hits, to survive, to keep fighting no matter what. On the display, the human ships were forming a new formation. They had stopped pursuing and were holding position. The message was clear. They could destroy the rest of the fleet whenever they wanted. They were choosing to wait. Admiral Chen appeared on the screen again. This is your final warning. Withdraw all forces from Council space. End your offensive. If you do not comply within 1 hour, we will resume fire. And this time we will not stop until your fleet is completely destroyed. Kael'tos looked at Thexanor. For the first time, the Emperor's confidence was gone. He looked old and scared. How many ships did we lose? Over 150, Thexanor replied. In less than 20 minutes. And they lost? None. One is damaged but still functional. The Emperor sat down heavily. How is this possible? We are the dominant military power in this region. We have the best ships, the best weapons. We have fast ships, Thexanor corrected. Light ships. Ships built to avoid damage. The humans have ships built to endure it. When we fight, we try to destroy the